We're gonna start now, and there's a very good crowd here, very good audience. So I'm sure more attendees will be joining soon. So welcome everyone to today's webinar on Bogota's Plan Bici, which is the city's ambitious cycling strategy. My name is Aris Moro, and I'm the Knowledge and Partnerships Manager for the C40 Cities Finance Facility, or CFF. I'm delighted to welcome today David Uniman, who is Bogota's Bicycle Manager, to present. This webinar is jointly organized by the CFF and the C40 Walking and Cycling Network. Let me just start with a few words about the CFF. The CFF is a joint initiative of C40 and GIZ, the German Development Agency, and we facilitate access to finance for climate change projects in cities around the world. Funded by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, the Government of the United Kingdom, and the United States Agency for International Development, we help cities support and deliver climate change projects. Bogota was one of the first 2 cities to receive CFF technical assistance, and we're currently supporting a key project within the city's overall cycling strategy, namely the Quinto Centenario Cycle Avenue. And Quinto Centenario translates as 500th anniversary. The project is a 25-kilometer cycle avenue running from El Tunal Park in the south to 170th Street in the north. And it builds on the city's long-standing efforts at developing high-quality cycling infrastructure. I'll give you a statistic to explain that. The mode share of cycling in Bogota increased from 0.6% in 1995 to almost 6% of all daily trips in 2015, which is almost a 10-fold increase. And the city has positioned itself as the cycling capital of Latin America. The CFF has recently published a report on our work in Bogota in 2017, which I invite you all to read to know about how Bogota became such a prominent cycling city and how it plans to continue to act as an example for cities in Colombia, for cities in Latin America, and for cities globally on how to reduce their dependence on private vehicles and how to encourage more sustainable forms of transport. So just a few instructions for all attendees. Please remain on mute throughout the webinar. We will have close to 30 minutes after David's presentation for questions, which you're welcome to submit in the Zoom chat box. You can submit the questions in the Zoom chat box by clicking on the icon at the bottom of the Zoom page. I will then go through your questions one by one. If you have any issues with the software, please feel free to contact me, and we'll try to help you. And later today, we will share the presentation on Plan Bici and the initial report on Quinto Centenario with all the attendees. So I now hand over to Mariola Panzuela, who is the C40 Walking and Cycling Network Manager, for just a quick intro about the network and its activities. And I will then briefly introduce Sergio Martinez and David Uniman.
Hi, everyone. As Aris mentioned, my name is Mariola Panzuela, and I'm the Walking and Cycling Network Manager. The network works today with 37 C40 cities, and its main objective is to basically support the cities to increase the share of trips taken by carbon-free mobility options, which are also healthy and safe. The network serves as a platform for cities to share and discuss best practices and together problem solve on challenges that cities face, so they can then improve and accelerate and replicate these strategy, these mobility strategies. One way in which the network ensures that there's knowledge transfer between our cities is by organizing and facilitating workshops. And we are very excited to be kicking off our first workshop in Bogota next week and learn more from Plan Bici on the ground. Back to you, Aris.
Great, thanks, Mariola. So we'll now pass it on to Sergio Martinez, who is the Undersecretary of Policy at the Secretary of Mobility in Bogota.
Hello, everyone. I don't know how many of you know, but here in Bogota, we're now under the second term of Mayor Enrique Peñalosa. Peñalosa is known in the world as a leader in urbanism and transportation. But I think it's very interesting that every time somebody asks him a transportation question, he always goes back to what for him is the most basic question, and that is what kind of city we want. Because it's from there that all the land use and transportation decisions really derive from. And the kind of city that he wants and that we're working for, it's one where everybody has equal opportunities. And that's why we're prioritizing non-motorized transportation and public transportation. And so back in his first term, almost 20 years ago, he started a revolution in Bogota, a revolution to recover public space, sidewalks, and also to put cycling in the agenda, because at that time, urban cycling was pretty much non-existent. Now that he's back, we're trying to take that approach to a next level. And for that, he actually created a new position, and that is the position of a bicycle manager for the whole city. That's the first time in history that we have something like that. And the purpose is for that person to try to coordinate all the different efforts that all the different city entities are trying to do to promote bicycle. So with that, I'm gonna pass this to my friend David Uniman, which is the bicycle manager of Bogota, and he will tell you exactly how are we trying to accomplish that goal.
Thank you, Sergio. Hi, everyone. This is David Uniman. I'm the bicycle manager for the city, and we're very excited to share with you all the different efforts that are underway to make Bogota a cycling capital city. First off, all our efforts are actually under the branding of Plan Bici. So we actually did an effort to brand all of the work that we're doing, and the logo that you see there is kind of the main interface that we have with the citizens in terms of explaining all the different efforts that we're doing. What is our vision? Our vision is to make Bogota a cycling capital of the world. And I know that many of you might think that it sounds very ambitious, maybe a bit far-fetched, but we're very serious about it. We're very serious about this vision. Right now, we have one of the largest, if not the largest, cycling networks in the Americas, and at least 700,000 or 800,000 trips per day. So we are effectively a cycling city already in terms of the scale of Northern and Southern America. But we definitely want to become competitive with cities like Copenhagen and Amsterdam, and we really aspire to become a cycling city. But the question is, what does it mean to become a cycling city? So we've broken it down into 3 aspects. First of all, we want more trips by bike. We want 10% mode share by bike by 2020. In 2015, the mode share was around 6%. So hopefully we'll be able to achieve our goal. We think we might be able to. Secondly, Vision Zero. It's a policy that's cross-cutting across all the work that we're doing. We want 0 traffic deaths for cyclists and pedestrians and any actor on the road. And we're actually working towards this pretty strongly, and we'll show you in a second what that means. And thirdly, we want different kinds of users. So we don't want just the strong and fearless. We want cycling to be for everyone. So we want young, old, men, women, rich and poor. So we want everyone to be cycling. So to start off, first of all, it's a good news that we want to share. For the first time in several years, we've actually managed to decrease the number of cyclist deaths. Between 2016 and 2017 was a 17% reduction. So that's a huge achievement, given that the trend was actually increasing as the trips were increasing. So not only did we see an increase in trips, but we actually managed to decrease the number of fatal accidents for cyclists. How do we do that? Through several different efforts. Here's just one example. This is work we're doing with Transmilenio, which is the bus system, where we work with Transmilenio operators to show them what are the blind spots for the buses, which is usually where the cyclists get hit. Around 50% of all the cyclist deaths happen with buses and large freight trucks. So we're really focusing our efforts on reducing deaths for buses and for freight trucks. Also, we're putting these nice stickers to warn cyclists that they are in a blind spot, and we also train them to show them where the blind spots are when they're riding on the road. This is our network, our projected network. Right now, the red is under implementation, the gray is already existing, and the blue is projected through all the projects that this administration is currently working on. So all in all, we have a target of 120 new kilometers of bike lanes. The existing network when we started was around 470. We hope to exceed that goal and have around 200 more kilometers to the bike network at the end of this administration. This is just an example of the type of bike lanes that we're building. So we're actually innovating. We're doing new designs. This is a bike lane on street. A lot of our bike lanes are actually on the sidewalk. And here we're working with one-directional bike lanes, changing from the traditional bi-directional bike lanes that we've usually had here, as well as trying to do some traffic calming, some 30-kilometer-per-hour zones, a lot of signage, and also trying to make better use of the neighborhood streets, because a lot of our bike lanes are on big avenues. And here we're trying to use neighborhood streets because they're cleaner, they're safer, and sometimes they're more direct. This is just another example of a bike lane that we innovated on. Here we're using a different type of segregation. Again, comfort is very important. Demand on this bike lane, for example, doubled when we did this treatment. It used to exist on the sidewalk. We brought it down and made what you see in the picture, and the demand doubled in a matter of months. Connectors, so here you can see a key connection over a bridge that goes into the downtown central area. And so we're basically just making these connections to make sure that the network is also continuous. These are spot treatments. So these are actually, we've done one spot treatment per week. So far we have about 104 spot treatments implemented. What we do is we look for the most dangerous intersections, and then we do signage, we do traffic calming, we reduce the turning radii. So we do a lot of things to try and reduce accidents. This is just another example of those spot treatments. So dangerous intersections, that's what we're focused on, reducing accidents and making them safer. This is a bike bridge. So basically, Bogota has like these very big avenues, and they interrupt the cycling network. So what we're trying to do is focusing on making use of bike bridges. This is a former vehicular bridge, and we took a lane and built this about a month ago. And more or less, we have about 3,500 cyclists in the peak hours. So it's already being heavily used. This picture was taken 2 days after implementation, and it helps to reduce traffic deaths. Parking. So we want a network of bicycle parking, and it's made up of 4 different components. So we have mass transport, which is the first one. It's not massive, it's mass transportation. The second one is public parking. The third one is companies and institutions. And the fourth one is public realm. So we're working on all those dimensions. What you see there is a map of the public parking that have a gold seal. So basically we're giving that gold seal to all the public parking facilities that meet the required law for having bicycle parking. And we're hoping to increase them to make all the public parking in the city, which is about 1,800, to have the minimum standard requirements for bicycle parking. Another example is for mass transit. This is one of the portals for Transmilenio BRT. So we're increasing the parking there. We've gone from 2,500 spaces to more than almost 3,800. And hopefully we'll get to 6,000. So we're increasing capacity for intermodal bicycle trips. And as I was saying, we have about 1,800 public parking institutions or facilities that exist in the city. About half of them don't comply with law, and we are working heavily to sometimes put heavy fines, sometimes to close down these public parking facilities, but we want all of them to have bicycle parking. Maintenance is a big issue. The bike network hadn't received maintenance for years. So this is the first time in many years that the bike network's receiving the much needed maintenance. This is just an example of one of the bike lanes that we're doing maintenance on. As you can see, we have these orange separators. So we also provide temporary bike facilities while we're doing the maintenance. More or less, we have about 50 kilometers of maintenance contracts already underway, and we hope to get to about 100 kilometers in total. This is our bicycle manual. So this is we call it the manual for the good cyclists. So what we wanted to do was several things here. First of all, we wanted cyclists to know their rights. So new laws in Colombia at the national level give cyclists several new rights, including the right to go on any street. Before, it used to be that they had to travel on the first meter to the right of the lanes. Now they can just travel like any other vehicle. And the second thing was we wanted them to know their duties, so their rights and their duties also included good behavior, both just for coexistence, but also because we wanted to save lives. So we came up with this manual. It has 15 good conducts or good behaviors for the cyclists, and we're actually working to teach them to cyclists. So here is an example of number 13, which we're trying to teach cyclists, to signal, use their hand signals when they're moving and when they're traveling. So this is something that will allow cyclists to save their lives, because it will give drivers a warning of what they're going to do. And also, we're working to teach drivers what these things mean. So here is just a very short clip. Let's see. Well, I think that maybe the technology is not allowing me to play this video, but basically we have these dancers who go outside and they show this merengue song, and they teach all the people all the hand signals. So for the 15 commandments, we're working on each one of them to try and teach what they are, and also just make sure that the cyclists know what their responsibilities are. This is our children's park. So basically, through this children's park, we hope to educate very young children in terms of what the correct use of the city infrastructure is. So we give them like a small miniaturized scale city. We show them the bike lanes, we show them the roads, the crossings, the intersections. We also have bus stops, and we teach them from a very early age how to navigate in the city to reduce the possibility that they're going to get into an accident. So we really want them to learn from a very young age, how to ride the bicycle the best way. In terms of bicycle economy, we are working on the bicycle center. So as you can see in the background, there's a render. It's still preliminary. The architects are designing the final version right now. But the bicycle center is a very ambitious project. It was the idea of Mayor Peñalosa. And what we wanted to do was to have a place where we could basically teach professional bicycle mechanics all they need to know to work in that field. The thinking behind it was it's a tool for social mobility. So it's for everyone, but especially it's an opportunity for very low income people to get this formation in bicycle mechanics, become professionals, and through that work to move up the social ladder. We're working on this project with the Department of Economic Development, with the Department of Education, with the Department of Recreation and Sports, and with ourselves, as well as with SENA, which SENA is the national agency that does technical and vocational training. So really, this is a very ambitious project. The big facility, which is the render in the background, is getting designed and built right now in the south of Bogota, where we have a lot of cyclists. But in the meantime, we're going to be opening actually very soon the temporary facility where we're going to start classes. So we're actually starting 2 years before schedule, 2 years before the building is finished, and we're going to start teaching classes and teaching people how to start their own bicycle business. Control and enforcement is key. We have we also work with our transit police. So we do a lot of control, making sure that people are following the laws. Last year, we issued about almost 8,000 tickets to fines to cyclists who disobeyed the transit laws. And we also immobilized what you see there in the picture, which are these motorized bicycle taxis. So we're actually friendly with bicycle taxis. We like the idea. We're actually working on thinking ahead of what bicycle taxis will look like in the city. But in the meantime, the motorized ones, so the ones that are assisted by motors, are illegal, and we don't like them because they tend to be unsafe. So those we're cracking down on, and we're making sure that the laws are getting respected, and also that everyone is working within the law in the streets. And on the bottom, you see it says updated transit law. What that means is basically that the transit law is a bit outdated. It goes almost all the way back to 2002. There was a small update in 2010, but basically it needs an overhaul for clarity. So there's a lot of different layers of laws here, and some of them can lend themselves to misinterpretation. So we're working to update them and to make sure that hopefully in a few months we can emit an updated version of what should cyclists do, what should they not do, and what should motor vehicles do in relation to cyclists. And of course, all that will be in coordination with our transit police. So this is wayfinding. Basically, in wayfinding, we have three components. We're finishing a big consulting project, and hopefully with that consulting project, we'll be able to implement a pilot. But we're basically coming up with, first of all, new street signage for cyclists. So this new street signage, as you can see there, will have identify what the main bicycle network is. That's the signs in blue. We will also be adding probably distance markers, so giving cyclists an indication of how far things are. And it will be smart, meaning that it will be adaptive to the distance of the destinations, to their size, so that cyclists are gently guided to where they need to go, as opposed to just bombarding them with flat information that's really two-dimensional. The second thing is complementary elements. So we're going to have maps, we're going to have totems, and we're going to have urban furniture that basically explains to people as they're riding on their bike how to navigate the system. And thirdly, we have a journey planner that we're building. So far the market has provided journey planners for the Transmilenio, and they've provided journey planners for cars. For bicycles, it's still pretty green and pretty early, so we haven't seen any successful journey planners yet. So we definitely wanted to make sure that from the public sector, we have a solid journey planner that, you know, makes sure that people know how to travel around the city and get around on their bike. For Quinto Centenario. So Quinto Centenario is this very ambitious project where we're working with CFF and C40 and GIZ and USAID and BID, a lot of acronyms. And we're working with all these partners to see if we can implement the first cycling superhighway across the city going north-south. This is an image of one of the sections of Quinto Centenario. Quinto Centenario is just referring to Bogotá's 500-year anniversary, which is coming up in a few years. But basically, it's a very interesting project because it has very different cross sections. In this example, you can see a cross section going through a neighborhood. Here we're using actually one of the designs that we've seen in the Netherlands with these shared spaces in these local streets where vehicles can basically use that rated median in case they need to overpass or make a U-turn or go past cyclists, but at the same time it protects cyclists by calming the street enough and giving them priority. Here's just a bigger map of Quinto Centenario. The one thing to highlight is that not just its size makes it important, but also the process and the financial objectives that we actually have. So our target is to see if we can fully fund, not just planning and design, but also construction, the implementation of Quinto Centenario using alternative funding sources. So not just the typical bank loan or directly using public funds, but to see if we can leverage through, for example, climate benefits or pollution reduction benefits or poverty reduction benefits, funds to build Quinto Centenario. And we're working with another set of experts on that topic, and with, of course, the C40, to identify how can we do this. And hopefully, if we're successful, then this can be used as a model for other cities to follow. Here, you can see it goes from north-south. It's approximately 25 kilometers. A lot of these projects have different cross sections, but they also have different other ongoing projects that are happening in the city. So some of these sections are actually getting built through other projects. But the idea is to have a very solid north-south connector for all income levels, rich in the north, lower income in the south, and then job centers in the middle. In addition to that, it will include several different amenities. So one of the things we studied in this first phase of the project, and what we call the idea phase, was how big does the project need to be? So You know, we can have the gold-plated project with bicycle counters and parking facilities and landscaping and new public space, or we can have, for example, the silver-plated project that can get a lot of the benefits, but at a lower cost. And so that's one of the big trade-offs that we're looking at is, you know, again, going back to the point of funding, what do we need to do to make sure that we get the right balance between costs and benefits, you know, and what's interesting to the different funding sources that are out there. So overall, we have a new website. It's actually planbici.gov.co. We invite you to take a look at it. We're uploading our work constantly on there. And hopefully we can share more of our work with you as we continue to work towards the finish line and make Bogota a cycling capital city.
Thank you, David, for an excellent presentation. I think my main takeaway is just how many different types of cycling infrastructure you have in the city and how everything comes together at once. And if the attendees have been to Bogota, the sort of, you see cyclists everywhere. You see cyclists of all kinds on sort of main busy highways, on the side streets, and it all comes together as a full ecosystem. So I'm just going to start with a question myself, and then I'll ask some of the other questions that are already in the chat box. So you touched on the sort of strong and fearless cyclists, which constitute still, I think, probably a sizable part of the cyclists in Bogota. And you mentioned your work on improving safety in Bogota for cyclists. But I'd like to touch a bit on security, in that cyclists are not just vulnerable to other vehicles, they're also at risk of muggings, of thefts, or personal harm, as they're often seen as a fairly easy target. And this kind of risks reinforcing the issue that cycling is only for the strong and fearless, excluding other users such as women. So what is Bogota doing to improve security along the cycle lanes and sort of making it more accessible to all types of users?
Thanks, Harris. That's a great point. So actually, as we speak right now, we are doing operatives in one of the areas here in the city with police, with the intelligence agencies, with our mobility agents, with trucks, with security for. I mean, it's a very big operation to crack down on these mafias that basically operate these people who steal bicycles, who rob cyclists. I mean, we're not talking about petty theft. We're talking about using weapons to take bicycles from people, and then they resell them. They dismantle them and they resell them. So we're actually working very strongly with the police and with the Department of Security to go to the root of the problem and to dismantle these criminal organizations that are actually behind a lot of the theft and the violence against cyclists that we see in the city. With that said, more on the surface, what we've done is, first of all, we've increased the bicycle police force by a factor of 4. So we actually had about 60 bicycle mounted police when we started. Now we have over 220. So they're patrolling continuously the bike lanes. And we actually get reports every day of, search and seizure of suspicious activities. And we're also working with citizens to try and get reports of, where the crime is happening. The last thing I'll say is that for sports cyclists, which is also a very big thing here, we have what's called rutas seguras, which is safe routes. And every week on Wednesday and Thursdays, we actually, with the police, we go with about 200 cyclists every morning up into the mountains of Bogota so that they can safely practice their sport. And it's actually been very successful. So we're working on all fronts to make the city safer as we speak.
Excellent, thanks for that. So a question from Pradwal, who's actually one of the co-authors of the report on Quinto Centenario that we just published. Something I picked up as well is, when you say that institutions are not complying with parking law, particularly in terms of bicycle parking facilities, what specific law are you referring to?
So we currently have bicycle parking requirements through different levels of laws, but the main ones that we have, which actually haven't been enforced in the past, are, two of them. So one is for what we call surface public parking facilities. So these are the ones that are open to the public, that are on the surface. So you will, I guess you're familiar with them. You'll see them basically where people, it's like an empty lot that should have been like a building. And we have a lot of them, again, almost 1,800. And the requirement there is that they either have the larger of 10% of all their spaces. So 10% of all the vehicular spaces have to be dedicated for bicycles, or at least a minimum of 12 spaces for bicycles. So that's the minimum requirement. With the program that we're doing for the, the quality seals, the gold and the silver, we're asking them to go a little bit further and do more. So we're asking them to give a bike registration number when you leave your bike. If the bike gets stolen, they should have insurance to cover it. They have different services like a pump in case you need air for your tires, and other amenities like a bathroom for cyclists. And then the other law, that was the public parking facilities law. The other one is for private development. So for private developments, the law requires for you to have a 2-to-1 relationship between vehicular parking spaces and bicycle parking spaces. But that one also hasn't been applied over the years. Right now, one of the innovative things that we're doing is with the new POT. POT is like the master land use plan. It gets updated every 10 years, and we're updating it. And what we're doing is not only are we eliminating minimum parking requirements, but we're also hoping to introduce more requirements for private developments to have bicycle parking facilities.
That's super interesting, David, and glad that, I mean, I feel like these laws had been in place, but they hadn't necessarily been enforced for a while, and I'm glad that the city is being enforced and making sure that there is access to bicycle parking, which I think is a big issue in cities all around the world. Just on the law side, you mentioned that a lot of cyclists are also being fined for breaking traffic laws. Again, what kind of traffic laws are they breaking, and is there some sort of lenience on cyclists, given that they're a cyclist ultimately? If a cyclist runs a red light, it's probably not as dangerous as if a car does.
Yeah, so right. There's a few that are the main ones that we see cyclists breaking most of the time. There's of course what you just mentioned, which is the traffic lights, which is an issue. The second one is lights and reflective material at night. So we require cyclists when it's dark, so either in the very early morning hours or at night, to be visible. And we've seen from other academic studies that being visible helps to save lives. I mean, there was this study that showed that, I think it was like the yellow jacket study, where they took like 4,000 people and gave half of them yellow jackets. And for that group of people, the accident rate dropped by half. So we know that being visible is important. We actually have it in our law to require lights and reflective materials. And what we do is, besides enforcing that, we also have a campaign where we go out and educate cyclists on this, and we give them lights and we give them reflective materials. So we're not just trying to be a police state. We're trying to help them comply with the law and help them be safer. The other one that's very controversial, and I'll mention it briefly, is this requirement that cyclists use the bicycle lanes when the bicycle lanes are available. Now, the other side of the argument is cyclists should be free to ride wherever they want. If there's a bicycle lane, they shouldn't have to use it. They can ride on the street also. The thing behind that, at least in the case of Bogota, is that we have a lot of cyclists riding on the street in these very fast highways, in these very fast freeways. Next to the freeway, there are bike lanes. So a lot of the tickets that we're giving to cyclists when they don't use the bike lane is because they're riding with 60 km/h traffic. They're riding in the middle of a freeway instead of using the bike lane. Again, it's a debate of freedom versus safety. And so the thinking is, really it's not that important whether they use the bike lane or not. What we're concerned about is that they're riding in these very high speed infrastructure for vehicles. And so the proxy for that is the current law, which is use the bicycle lane. So that one's one that's very controversial, but so far we're applying it to try and save lives.
Great. Thanks, David. So there's loads of questions. I'm going to start with one from Fernanda Rivera, who actually has basically your position in Mexico City, about intermodal benefits for cyclists in Bogota, in terms of how the interaction with Transmilenio is, for example.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
In terms of the intermodal infrastructure in Bogota, in terms of interactions between cycle lanes and the BRT in Bogota.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. I mean, besides the parking that we already showed, so we're increasing parking bicycle parking in the Transmilenio stations and portals by a factor of 3. So we're definitely adding more capacity. We're also looking at those connections. So, for example, a lot of the new bike lanes that are going to get built are actually getting built through the Transmilenio project. So we're including them in the trunk lines and they go along it. But we're also making sure that we connect a lot of the stations for Transmilenio with our bicycle lanes. So that's, I mean, I think that's the fundamental aspect. There's also another big component, which is the metro. So the metro is also going to add a significant number of bicycle kilometers of bike lanes, and it's going to increase the bicycle parking facilities. Hopefully, we expect by about 10,000 spaces, because we're actually working with Metro to try and do similar to like the Dutch style parking facilities in their train stations. We're trying to do something similar with the metro stations, where we would have underground, massive, high capacity bicycle parking facilities.
Great, thank you. A question from Daniela Moraes about how easy access to a bike is in Bogota, and are there any incentives or subsidies for purchasing a bike?
Yeah, so the short answer is from the public sector, we don't have any program for helping people buy a bike. There's a lot of citizen-led initiatives that are actually very beautiful. Recently, I met someone from this one place called Fundación Tortuga, which is basically they take older bikes and they repair them, and then they give them to people who need them. But there's a lot of efforts like this. What we're actually trying to work on right now is to do something similar with all the bicycles that we have recovered, that were either stolen or that we just simply found abandoned. And we usually have several hundred or almost 1,000 at a time. And so legally, we're still kind of waiting for the national level government to dictate to us how to return them or what to do with them. But once we figure that out, I think we can start doing some of these similar programs. There is one thing I want to say though about incentives, is that our law, a very recent law, the bicycle law, incentivizes bicycle use by giving public employees half a day off for every 30 days that we come to work on a bicycle. So that it's a maximum of 8 days vacation per year that you can gain. But basically, what we're doing is we're trying to incentivize people to come to work by bike. And actually a lot of the public agencies, we're already measuring how many people come by bike and how many benefits they can get.
Yeah, I've heard about this before, and it's such an extraordinary incentive, and I just cannot imagine having that in the UK where I'm from, just because. But yeah, it's fantastic that the national government is fully behind this. So a follow-up to the question about access to bikes in terms of plans or studies for bike sharing, for public bikes.
Yes, hi, this is Sergio. So bike share is actually something that City Council dictated that the city should have a few years ago. Because of that mandate, the Secretary of Mobility hired some consultants, and they did some studies that were the basis for awarding a contract. A contract was awarded, but there were some issues with that, so it had to be finished. And us in this new administration, we received a proposal for a PPP from the private sector. We're currently working on that. It has gone through several stages. We're approaching the end. So hopefully we'll have good news at the end of this year.
Great, thank you. Looking forward to the development there. So next question is from Alma Revivo, and it's about electric bicycles. What's the policy regarding electric bicycles and other types of sort of small personal electric vehicles? And can they use the bicycle lane? And if so, how does that affect traffic and the standards that are applied?
Yeah, so it's funny because when we were in the Netherlands last year, we noticed that, you know, of course their bicycle network is amazing and their bicycle culture is very consolidated, but we noticed that there's these up and coming issues with electric vehicles using the bicycle infrastructure. And over there, what we saw was there was a full tolerance for these electric vehicles riding with the bicycles on this beautiful infrastructure, much to the frustration of cyclists who felt very threatened by these heavy, fast-moving vehicles. Here, we're going in a different direction. So we have a law, and we also think that motorized vehicles after a certain point should not be sharing infrastructure with bicycles and should be riding on the street with other motorized vehicles. The limit is actually, it has three components. The first one is weight. The second one is power, so the power of the engine. And the third one is the speed. So we have a maximum speed of 25 kilometers per hour. But basically our thinking is you can ride on the bike lanes as long as it's assisted power. So if it's an assisted power bicycle, whether motorized or electric, we're okay with it as long as it's underneath the wattage maximums and the weight maximums and the speed maximums. Beyond that point, again, we think that they should belong with the motorized vehicles.
Interesting. And yeah, I mean, I'm wondering what other cities have decided onto this, because I know it's a growing issue in London as well. So the next question is, let me just ask a question about the bike center. If you're able to sort of share a bit more about the idea behind it, about in terms of its plans to encourage apprenticeships on cycling, encourage a growing bike economy, and also something about the bicycle-oriented design idea, which is really embedded in the bike center.
Yeah, great. So the bike center is one of our favorite projects. It brings together many cool things. So first of all is the architecture. As you just mentioned, we actually thought when we were starting this project, we said, okay, we want the physical shell of the bicycle center to be something incredibly cool and something that's totally new. And what we did was we actually brought someone from the Netherlands who is an expert on bicycle-oriented design, and together with this expert and with our Society of Architects, we came up with an architecture contest that would prioritize and give points to the people who came up with the most bicycle-oriented design possible. We finished the competition. There was a winning entry. Basically, his concept was the temple of the bicycle. So the bicycle center will look something more like a Greco-Roman temple, but it will be used, of course, with modern materials. It will be used for the bicycle center. It's about 2,000 square meters. That's how big it is. And what's going to happen inside is basically we're going to have two things. So one is the bicycle mechanics. We're designing. So right now we have a few classes with SENA, which is the vocational training agency for bicycle mechanics. Those classes last about 40 hours each. So we have entry-level bikes, we have medium-level bikes, and we have high-end bikes. What we're aiming for is to actually, in a year and a half, when we open the big facility for the bicycle center, to have a 2-year certificate program on bicycle mechanics. That 2-year program is based on what we learned when we visited Germany, where they actually have a vocational training program that's about 2 years long for bicycle mechanics. So we want that level of quality in the training that we're going to give, and we're working on it right now. The second component, besides the bicycle mechanics, is entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship basically is we have what we call the route of entrepreneurship with the Secretary of the Economic Development. we're going to incentivize people to teach them how to start their bicycle business. So we want bike shops, we want bicycle mechanics, we want people to import bicycles, we want people to manufacture clothing. So anything that has to do with a bicycle business, we're going to be incubating it at this bicycle center and teaching them and getting them started on how to do this. But I think the overall message is social mobility. Both the entrepreneurship component and the bicycle mechanics component is really aimed at social mobility, at giving people who have very little possibilities for other types of education, or who are just very passionate about the bicycle, a chance to learn a skill, a hard skill that they can use for their life, and start a business with it and improve their life. So really, it's a very beautiful project.
Yes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's in an area where the employment opportunities are not maybe as available as in other areas of Bogota. So yeah, it's a great initiative, and I really look forward to it being implemented. So I have two questions about Quinto Centenario. So one of them is about a bit more in terms of the overall number of users that are expected to be on the corridor, and what kind of impact will it have on the mode share on that corridor. And the second one is actually about the cost of the overall infrastructure for Quinto Centenario.
Yeah, so if you remember the map, it goes north-south. What happens there is a lot of the attractors for trips are in the center, what we call the expanded center, which goes from, for those of you who are familiar with Bogota, from 72nd Street all the way to more or less 6th Street in the center. So what happens is people from the north who are higher income and motorized come to the center, and people from the south who are lower income, in some cases motorized because of motorcycles, but in other cases they just use transit, come to the north to the center. So what Quinto Centenario essentially is going to do is two different things. One is we hope that it will create mode shift for the people in the north. We will get people out of cars and we will get them on the bicycle, because it will be much more competitive than taking a car in the horrible traffic jams that we have. And for the people in the south, what we hope is to create access that wasn't there before. Because right now, the connection, the cyclist connection to that part of the city, El Tunal, is not as direct as we would like it to be. And so people can't really comfortably take the bicycle. So with these two kind of twofold impacts, what we really hope is to get about 30,000 cyclists during per hour during the peak across the corridor. So we're designing it for high capacity. So hopefully we can get about between 3,000 and 5,000 per direction hour in the highest points. Very wide bicycle lanes, but at least 30,000 cyclists in the peak hour benefiting from this infrastructure. And as far as the cost goes, again, going to the gold-plated or the silver-plated version, we have a high estimate of about $70 million for that includes not just the bike lanes, but also public space improvements, bicycle parking, bicycle tunnels, lighting, all these different things. And on the lower end, we have about a low-range estimate of about $44 million for the project.
Great, thanks, David. Great, I have another question from Alma. How do you encourage private bicycle parking in existing residential office buildings in terms of retrofitting this parking? Yeah, considering that new building codes obviously cannot change necessarily existing buildings. And actually, just a corollary to this question is, how do you, and are you able to engage businesses, particularly large corporations, in your push to provide facilities for cyclists and facilitate commutes by bike?
Yeah, okay. So let me answer the easy one first. We have a network called the Red Empresarial, Red de Movilidad Sostenible, where we have almost 100 private sector companies, universities, and public entities all participating in this network to incentivize cycling use. Now, within that network, one of the things that we're requiring them to do is to have what's called a PIMS, which is a sustainable mobility plan. for each one of them. And in that sustainable mobility plan, what they do is that they provide bicycle parking facilities, they provide incentives, they provide events, information, education, so all these different things to get people to cycle. So more or less, we've had, through our big events, about 100,000 bicycle trips done in a single day in the city, thanks to this program that's called the Sustainable Mobility Network. So we do work very closely with private sector companies. There's a team here that does a great job at bringing them all together. And we have these very big events, for example, called El Reto, which means the challenge, where different companies challenge each other. So we'll have one big bank challenging another big bank to see who can bring the most cyclists to their work office in that day. We'll have, for example, Transmilenio and Mobility challenged each other to see which was the public agency that had the most people cycling. And we actually had a challenge between Bogota and Medellin, where Bogota challenged Medellin to see which city could bring the most cyclists out during that one day. We're hoping, and if they're listening, we're hoping to do a challenge with Buenos Aires and Fernanda in Mexico. So if you're listening, hopefully you'll accept our challenge that we can get all our people on the bicycle in the same day and see who is the most cycling friendly. And then for your other question about yeah, we should do a Latin American challenge. For your other question about private parking facilities, to be honest, I don't have a clear answer for it. I mean, as you said, very smartly, the laws are very hard to apply retroactively once the permits have been given for construction. So I think a lot of the efforts are going to focus on moving forward. I think in a second stage, given resources, once we manage to get all the public facilities to comply, then if we have some oxygen left, we could start a program where we actually start going to private buildings and start trying to incentivize bicycle parking.
Great, thank you, David. So we'll probably have time for just one more question. And just want to ask you about what the main drivers for new cycling infrastructure are in the cities. I know obviously having Mayor Peñalosa back in office is a big driver in terms of his, I think, unrelenting focus on cycling infrastructure as a way of moving people around. But are there any other drivers in terms of why people are asking for cycling infrastructure in Bogota?
Yeah, I mean, I want to say something that's very important, and that's Bogota has a very rich cycling culture. So we have what's called colectivos de la bici, which are basically citizen groups that promote cycling use from their different areas of the city. These groups are very, very diverse. They're very different kinds of groups with different causes. There's some that use the bicycle to work on the peace process and on people displaced by violence in Colombia. There's people who use the bicycle as a means of empowering women. We've seen a lot of women bicycling groups recently. We also saw some cycling groups for some of the hooligans for one of the football teams, and to try and get them to not become so violent through the use of the bicycle. So there's a very large citizen movement to promote cycling use. And I think to share a personal reflection, right now we are in an administration that is very bike friendly. Peñalosa is the most bike friendly mayor I can imagine. But there have been mayors that have been unfriendly to the bicycle. Two mayors ago, for example, the mayor, Samuel Moreno, he did not want any bicycle infrastructure. He actually took away bicycle infrastructure. And these citizen groups were almost antibodies for when the people in office didn't want cycling. So they would actually protest, and they would challenge the city council, and they would advocate for more cycling. So it's been actually a very interesting process. We have a bicycle week every year, and in the last bicycle week, we had a forum with a lot of these citizen groups where they actually discussed among themselves what their role was moving into the future. I found it fascinating because what they were talking about was what is their role in a pro-bicycle administration. Their role has been in many cases to pressure and to oppose people who are not so bicycling savvy. But in our case, we're very pro-bicycle, and so it's been an interesting debate of what is the role of citizen groups in an administration that is very pro-cycling. The other thing is that the city council actually has one of their few kind of groups that they created is the bicycle group. So the city council, you know, who has 40-something members, about half of them are pro-bicycle, and they belong to this group, and they actually enact interesting forward-thinking policies for the bike. And we've been in a very interesting debates with them recently over some of those policies.
Thank you, David. I realize it's 11, but again, a sort of really quick question, if you're able to wrap it up in sort of 1-2 minutes. In terms of modal integration, is it possible to carry a bike inside a Transmilenio bus, for example? And yeah, that's the kind of question that I want to ask.
So it's funny you ask, because yesterday, the city council asked us to look again at that issue. Right now, we allow folding bikes to go on the BRT. We don't allow any other type of bikes to go on the mass transit system. And the reason is because if you see a Transmilenio, you'll notice that we are capacity constrained. Our capacity is a finite resource, and we need to use it to move as many people as possible. And so we don't allow bicycles, normal bicycles, on the system. But what the city council asked us to look yesterday was a question that came up a few years ago, and it was whether we can put bike racks on the buses. So not on the big red buses, but on like the smaller local blue buses, to put bike racks. We are in favor of considering putting bike racks on there. There's a few legal issues at the national level that we have to overcome to be able to do that. Some laws don't allow them because of visibility issues, etc. But I think it's something that hopefully we can push forward and see if we can have some bike racks in the smaller buses in Transmilenio.
Great. Thanks, David. If you're able to just answer one more question about air quality. How is air quality in Bogota? How is cycling helping with air quality in Bogota? And so do normal cyclists wear masks in Bogota to protect themselves from pollution?
Yeah, okay. So two things to say about that. I think that we had a recent scare 2 weeks ago with air quality. We actually got into yellow level alert because of deteriorating air quality. Thank God we had a 1-week vacation because of Easter, and everything calmed down and the air quality improved. But that really raised the alarms with the Department of the Environment and with us. So in our conversations with them, there's two things. So one is prevention, and the other one is reduction. With reduction, I think things like Quinto Centenario really are fundamental for improving air quality in the city. I mean, our estimate is that about 67,000 tons of CO2 will be reduced in about a 10-year period with Quinto Centenario. So the more bicycle lanes we can build, the more trips we have, the more mode shift we can get, the better it will be moving forward. And in terms of prevention, yes, I mean, to be honest, I started using a mask very recently after that yellow level scare. It's something that we're working on, and I think that it has to do a lot with some of the older fleet, the older bus fleet and the older truck fleet that uses very outdated engines. But it's something that for sure we're monitoring. We have a very sophisticated monitoring system here for air quality, and you know, if it right now we haven't needed to, but if it starts getting worse, we are definitely going to be proactively communicating with cyclists on what are the areas to travel around. Like, for example, the local roads, like the picture we showed you with the bicycle lane in the neighborhoods that have good air quality, and try and get them off the bigger roads with bad air quality.
Thank you so much, David. I realize we're now already 3 minutes over, so I'm gonna wrap it up here. Again, thank you so much, David, for your presentation and for answering all these questions from myself, a lot of them, and from the audience. Thank you, Sergio, as well, for your presentation, and thank you, Mariola, for helping to co-host this workshop. There are loads of things that we're doing in Bogota with Quinto Centenario, and I'm sure you'll hear more about it. And yeah, best of luck with everything that you're doing in Bogota.
Thank you, and you're all welcome to come here and visit us whenever you want. And just to say that we have I think one of the key factors of success has been the team. I mean, Sergio is the boss in terms of all the transportation modes. And then from there on down, I think we have very, very smart people working on each of the modes. And I think that really makes a difference.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
And yes, if you could please answer the poll that you've just been sent that you should be seeing on the Zoom, that would be great. Thank you.